Nation! You're now listening to the most opinionated, the most exciting, the most son of a Schmidt. You guys actually do something useful here, right? Like, is anything you do even beneficial to someone? Whatever. Now to the show that literally has tens, that's right, tens of followers. The show that brings the Ozone Radio Network to levels of mediocrity that only Michigan fans would know. This is the Sons of Schmidt, starring Mike Meals and Brandon Zimmerman on the Ozone Radio Network.
Hey, welcome back, Sons of Schmidt fans. This is Mike Meals, your host, welcoming you to Season 3, Episode 8 of the Sons of Schmidt podcast. Joining me, as always, is my good buddy Brandon Zimmerman from Hayes and Cannon at the Ozone. And what's going on, Brandon? What you know, brother?
What is up, Mike? I'm glad to be back in Colorado. Had my little trip out to Missouri, Branson. That's a different world out there.
Whole lot of country out there, huh?
Yeah, it's like where every washed up country singer goes to ride it out a little bit longer.
So I'm assuming you saw like Dolly Parton or something?
We did go to the Dolly Parton Stampede, which was fun.
Well, yeehaw!
Yeehaw! It was a blast. Yeah, it was totally not my wife and I's cup of tea, but we got to go visit some family, and my son had fun because, I mean, like, this was tourist trap heaven, so, like, there was putt-putt golf everywhere, and my 5-year-old loves his putt-putt golf, so we sampled their finest putt-putt and went to a few of their shows, but it's so family-friendly there that they don't serve alcohol at these shows, so my wife and I had to sneak some booze in, and that's how we do it.
See, I'm trying to figure out how that is a definition of family friendly, because if you know my family, you have to have booze. So,
yeah, I mean, if I was your family, I'd have to drink too.
Exactly. Speaking of that, what you got in your glass tonight, man?
Man, I forget what it's even called. It's some Alabama crap, some Roll Tide, something Mays, Hayes, Willie Mays, Hayes. I got Clyde Mays, Alabama style whiskey. Trying something new. Roll Tide.
Roll Tide.
Roll Tide.
All right. Well, you're doing better than me. I've decided to really try to change it up. You know, we've been with bourbon and whiskey all along, and you know, last week I went with some orange juice and vodka, I think it was. This week I'm going hardcore. I'm going with Sunkissed and Sunkissed.
What?
Yeah, it's a little crazy. I know. You know, sometimes.
Are you pregnant?
Yes.
Okay.
Clearly. You want to see my belly?
Yeah.
All right, man. So, obviously, as I said, this is the 8th episode of the year. Ohio State's sitting at 7-0. They're 4-0 in the conference. I know it's hard to believe, but if they're undefeated overall, they're probably undefeated in conference. That's usually how that works out. They go to West Lafayette, Indiana, take on the Purdue Boilermakers this Saturday night. Game's going to be on ABC. The big crew's going to be there, so you have Herbie and Fowler and those guys. Little tidbit for you here. I don't know if you noticed this or not, because most people don't. We generally don't pay attention to Purdue. But Purdue comes into this game 3-3 overall, 2-1 in the conference. But they are currently tied for second in the Big Ten West, which tells you how bad the Big Ten West is. So before we get into anything, really recapping the Minnesota game or looking forward to Purdue, is there anything that you want to put out there? Because, you know, I've been told there's been some news that's been in all the news cycles, and heavens forbid if we've made it through 10 minutes of this podcast without mentioning anything. So is there anything you want to touch on?
Yeah, I mean, like, apparently Nick Bosa has left the school or something. I guess, like, that's supposed to be a big deal. I don't know. I guess people thought he was coming back at some point.
Who's all surprised that he's going to go ahead and go?
I have no idea. I mean, like, if anyone really thought Nick Bosa was going to take another step at Ohio State, yeah, I don't even know what to tell you, because it just wasn't going to happen. It doesn't make business sense. It doesn't make any sense at all for Nick Bosa to come back. And So, I mean, like, it sucks. I mean, Nick Bosa is awesome. Him and his brother have been two of my favorite players that have came through Ohio State in a long time. But, I mean, as soon as he got hurt, and then you hear that his recovery time still had, 12 weeks left. And, I mean, it just makes sense. He needs to focus on making his money. He's going to be the top pick in the draft probably. So, go focus on that.
Yeah, it would be different if it was a legit chance that he's in practice now and able to do football activities this week before November gets here. But as far along as he is from being recovered, it makes perfect sense. It sucks as a Buckeye fan, obviously. But, you know, I mean, hey, it makes great sense for him. And by all means, best of luck to him. You know, and I mentioned it to you. We were talking about this earlier. I don't remember where exactly it was I heard this, but somebody else had pointed this out here on the ORN. And, you know, the question has to be raised is even if he were to try to come back, would he then be academically eligible for like a college football playoff run? Because you roll over into the next semester, as much time as he's missed being away from campus, he might not even be eligible. So not only does it make sense because he probably wouldn't be able to play in those games, it makes sense because if he actually does want to continue his education at some point, at least now he can withdraw and still come back and get it, not have a semester full of failing grades on his record. So more than just, you know, one side of it actually does make sense. I don't know if he's ever going to come back and finish his degree or not. I hope he does. I hope everyone does. But, you know, there's the whole other aspect of it there that most people haven't thought about. So that was something I had in mind too. But all right, man. So we made sure to get Nick Bosa in here because that was the only thing anybody wanted to listen to because that's what everybody's asked all the coaches and players about. But with that in mind, let's take a quick break. When we come back, we'll kick off segment 1. We'll start looking back at Minnesota and go over some of the news there. So take a minute and we'll be right back.
This is the Ozone Radio Network, a Hayes and Cannon production. For the latest episodes of all your favorite podcasts covering Buckeye Nation, look for the Ozone Radio Network on iTunes, Google Play, iHeartRadio, and Speaker. You can also find the latest episodes by clicking on the Hayes and Cannon tab at theozone.net. Once again, here are the Sons of Schmidt.
All right, Brandon. So looking back at this last weekend's game, you know, it was kind of an interesting game for fans to watch. Obviously, Ohio State, you know, they played Minnesota. They win 30-14. You know, a couple scores. You know, they win by a couple scores, I should say. Hold Minnesota below their season average for points that they've given up on defense. If you look at some of the stats, Ohio State had a good game. You know, you win by multiple scores. You hold the opposition to only 2 touchdowns. You have another 400-yard passing game. You know, you look at that part of it, there are parts that really stuck out that were great. Obviously, KJ Hill makes the catch of the year on that one-handed grab so far for Ohio State. And there were a lot of things that weren't all that great either. But before we get into it, let's start on defense because that's where I think we're going to spend most of our time right now. What was your take on the Ohio State defense's performance on Saturday, and what did you notice?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm going to talk about it a little bit later. I think I'll save this for kind of my son of a Schmidt, but, you know, I mean, like, there's definitely growing pains. I think we kind of texted about this too. Like, I don't put any more stock in that game against Minnesota than I would if they shut them out. I feel like it was just a weird game for them. I mean, it's a noon game against a shit team. It's you're missing, you know, 3 starters going into the game. You get 2 more hurt like right away. And I mean, yeah, they came out sluggish. I know the defense has holes. The defense looked like crap, but like my concern didn't raise at all from that game on Saturday. It's the same that it was going into that game. And I mean, they started off incredibly slow. They kind of buckled down those last 3 quarters. I think they only gave up like a combined something like 260 yards over the final 3 quarters and 7 points. So, I mean, like that's kind of what we expected them to do against Purdue. But
You mean against Minnesota?
Yeah, against Minnesota. But yeah, I mean, it's just there are definitely things that should have upset you. There were times as I'm sitting in the passenger seat of that car watching the phone, like I wanted to throw my phone out the window in the middle of West Kansas someplace. But yeah, I mean, it's just a lot of it's scheme type stuff. And then Isaiah Pryor out there doing the hokey pokey or whatever he's doing out there besides playing safety. So yeah, I mean, that's where I'm at with the defense. I mean, like, I'm frustrated by them, of course, but, like, I'm not frustrated because of the Minnesota game.
I got you. Yeah, you hit the nail on the head there. There's a lot to be upset about, but nothing that was a new concern out of Saturday's game. You know, I made some notes here when we were talking and getting ready for the show. Obviously, my biggest concern and everybody's biggest concern is linebacker play. On more than a few times, if you watch or rewatch the game, there are times where Tough Borland just does not look like he knows what his read is supposed to be. You know, he gets caught up going the wrong way. He gets caught up looking at something that's got him confused, buying into the wrong play or whatever, and he's taking himself out. You know, a lot of times you can get by with aggression mistakes if they are truly being aggressive, but he's just being eliminated on some of them. A couple other things I noticed, like, you know, Ohio State, the way this defense is playing right now, they need beef in the middle of the defensive line. They need somebody, you know, I always think of Corey Hampton from the Steelers. You know, he was like 6 foot tall, 480 pounds or whatever. I mean, I don't know if that's legit, but he was a big dude, and he just would clog up the middle, and Ohio State needs that very badly. You know, I think those two things right there would significantly help. I wasn't more concerned with the defensive backs, the way they played on Saturday. I'm not saying that everything was great, but I wasn't more concerned by it. I mentioned the linebackers. The defensive line, part of it, yes, everybody was out injured, like you said, but part of it also was the defensive line did not shine like we have expected them to. And if the defense this year, if it is going to be as good as we need it to be for the last month or so of the season, the defensive line, no matter what holes they have to plug up because guys are out injured or whatever, they're going to need to step up because the rest of the defense cannot carry this team if the defensive line is not making an impact. So that was my take on what I saw.
Well, and yeah, I mean, I know I kind of talked about it a few weeks ago too. I really think the beef on the defensive tackles needs to be raised. You know, like it's almost like Ohio State defensive line has too many pass rushers and not enough people clogging space. So you've got 4 dudes sitting there trying to get to the quarterback when you need some of that beef to kind of just sit back and take up some of those blockers and take it out. I mean, I'm at the point where I would rather see Draymond Jones slide outside and have your 2 defensive ends be Draymond Jones and Chase Young. Draymond Jones can rush the passer, but we need that Tyquan Lewis type of guy that can rush the passer, but also is just a big dude that kind of occupies bodies and will kind of cut off that outside. I feel like Davon Hamilton has really improved, and he needs to be starting at a defensive tackle. Then you could throw someone like Rob Landers in there and just have your starting line be Draymond Jones, Chase Young at the end, Davon Hamilton, Robert Landers. Get guys like Togiai and Antoine Jackson and Taron Vincent to kind of clog up the middle. It just you don't need Rob Landers in the middle there at 270 pounds. Trying to clog up the middle and getting the linebackers all caught up in the linemen. And that's what's been happening all year. So I'm at the point where, like, I'm a huge Jonathan Cooper fan. I've been a fan of him for the past 2 years, but I would rather have Draymond Jones start at defensive end. He's shown what he can do as a defensive tackle. I think to improve his stock even more as a pro, move to the outside and show what he can do out there and just get some big 300-pound guys to clog up the middle. Like, we don't need them to pass rush. I just want 2 guys that can occupy both guards and the center and free up the linebackers a little bit. Because right now we don't have that. We have 4 guys that are rushing the passer and letting those offensive linemen get to the second level, and it's causing problems for the Buckeyes.
Absolutely. Now, what about like the defensive back play, back seven and defensive backs in the passing game? Look, I'm not going to beat a dead horse. We all know that if you want to move the ball in Ohio State right now, you throw a slant pattern or a skinny post. But outside of our inability or unwillingness to try to stop that, what was your take on the way the backfield played on defense?
I was the most frustrated with the defensive backfield because, I mean, it's just like you knew what was coming, and you just see, like you see Isaiah Pryor, who's the worst coverage guy on the starting team, lining up one-on-one with slot, like 10 yards off the ball. Like, you knew what was coming, and, like, they just didn't care. And, like, Tough Borland's out there, like you said, he's just been playing lost all year. I mean, like, Tough Borland's not playing good football right now. And so, I mean, I think Ohio State needs to protect Isaiah Pryor as much as they can. I think he can become a very good player down the road. Right now, setting him up one-on-one with a slot wide receiver is setting him up for failure. Tough Borland's lost right now. At this point, I've already talked about what I would do with the defensive line, but I would almost go nickel every down with this Buckeye team. Never allow the safeties to go one-on-one with the wide receivers. You know, bring in Damon Arnett, Sean Wade, Jeffrey Okudah, Kendall Sheffield. I mean, and I'm still on the boat that I would have Sean Wade starting at safety. And I think we're getting closer and closer to that happening. At the very latest, if Isaiah Pryor really does not step up here soon, I would expect Sean Wade to come out after that bye week as the starting safety, because you see him getting more and more playing time. So you get Sean Wade back there at safety, who's a very good open field tackler where Isaiah Pryor's been struggling. Sean Wade can line up on a slot wide receiver. Then you've also got Damon Arnett, Jeffrey Okudah, and Kendall Sheffield to be the main corners. I think you've got enough there. I would kind of play nickel right now and just have Malik Harrison and I don't even know who the other linebacker would be. I think Tough Borland would be the odd man out right now, and I'm not a huge fan of Pete Werner so far this year. I mean, they say he's like 6'2", 230 or something, but I mean, like, looking at him, I mean, he looks about 5'10",
he plays very
200
small,
pounds.
Yeah.
I was really impressed with Justin Hilliard's play. I mean, like, I would be okay with Malik Harrison and Justin Hilliard being their two linebackers in that nickel set, because I feel like both of them have the ability to drop back in coverage and are quick enough to go up and make plays. Baron Browning, too. I mean, you and I have been saying that since the beginning of the year. Baron Browning does not need to be at middle linebacker. I think he would be better utilized at the outside. So, I think we're kind of in a standby pattern. I think they need to go more nickel, especially against Purdue, who's going to throw the ball 75 times. Yep. Really just load up and try to eliminate your mismatches. I mean, like I said, I feel like a lot of what's happened to Isaiah Pryor, I kind of feel sorry for him. I'm not a fan of his right now, but I feel like Ohio State has kind of set him up to fail at this point, and they need to protect Isaiah Pryor a little bit more because I feel like he can do some things.
Oh, excuse me. I get ready to say something, and somehow I inhaled and almost choked here.
Was it because I gave Pryor a compliment?
I think it was. You took my breath away. The one other thing I noticed, and I made the note of it, and we didn't really get a chance to talk to it, but I made note of this. If you watch the game, and God forbid it's going to happen again this Saturday, but when Ohio State's in their base look, they have the three linebackers on. They roll one of the outside linebackers out on the slot guy. And he's not necessarily, lined up directly on him. He's maybe a little inside of him. Like, they look like they're trying to take away the slant. But your pre-snap read, when you look at it, they're lining up like they're trying to show a zone, two deep zone is what they're looking at here. The problem is everybody and their brother knows you're not running zone. So your linebacker lines up way out off that slot guy. And then right before the snap, or as soon as the ball snaps, he tries to come crashing down and get into the play at that point. All you're doing is getting him out of the play before the snap happens. I don't understand it. Either leave him underneath that slot guy so that he does help take away the slant, or line him up at his normal position so he can actually make a play on the ball when it's a run or the quarterback rolls out or something. I saw that it had to have been a half dozen times before I had to stop paying attention to it on Saturday when I was rewatching the game. And it was frustrating to no end because, like I said, everybody knows you're not running a zone defense right now. So,
well, it's sort of like the offensive side of the ball. Everyone knows when you're running the ball, Dwayne Haskins is not going to run the ball.
Yep,
like we
keep
keep on
doing the zone read, exactly,
running in that zone read, expecting the defense to somehow fall for it, and they don't. And so, I mean, I think defensive and offense, I think both coaching staffs kind of hope the other team's just dumb and they don't know football. But, I mean, so far they're getting away with their talent, but they're going to have to make changes there. And I think the offensive side's just the same way as the defensive side is. They're just like you were saying.
Well, in the radio and podcasting business, we call that a segue. So good job, Brandon. So now that we're on the offense here, let's go ahead and talk about this. Obviously there were some things that were a disappointment. Ohio State, what was it? They had 86 yards rushing from the running backs. It was a total of 92 yards for the team running the ball against a less than ideal defense from Minnesota. There were a couple things, obviously, besides that stuck out to me personally. The first one was, for the love of God, Dwayne Haskins, I love you throwing the ball, but when you roll out or you break the pocket or you break contain, stop trying to cut the ball back upfield. Run to the sideline. You're going to be just fine. There was a play early in the game. I think they were actually going into the end zone. I'm trying to remember right now off the top of my head, but anyways, Haskins rolls out to the bottom of the screen, and as he's rolling out, he decides to try to cut up underneath Mike Weber, trips himself up, doesn't get the first down or the touchdown, whatever it was that they were going to, now that I'm thinking about it. But it's like, if he literally just runs to the sideline on the projection path that he's on, he picks up that first down. There was no one there, but he turns upfield and gets crushed by a linebacker. Matter of fact, it was the fumble, the one where he fumbled the ball and it bounced right back up to him. That was that play. That never has to happen. The other thing is, and I've said this last week and I'll say it again, somebody please teach Dwayne Haskins how to slide. Before he gets killed, teach him how to slide. So, I had a couple other notes, but, first things first, let me get your take. What were your thoughts on the offense? Because, at the end of the day, Haskins did have an amazing game, as far as yardage goes. He had another 3 touchdowns, so that was great. But what was your take on the offense?
I think with the offense, I think everyone kind of expected Ohio State just to come out and sleepwalk through this and win, by a lot and get up early. Honestly, I don't feel like the coaching staff really put too much thought into Minnesota. I mean, I think their goal coming into this game was to try to give some guys some rest as much as possible. I mean, CJ Saunders was playing in the first quarter. I mean, it just, it was very unimaginative. There wasn't really much thought put into this offensive game plan. I really don't think. It was kind of the same plays over and over. I mean, a lot of people say it, but it was kind of like that old Tecmo kind of thing where you got the 4 plays and they just ran kind of variations of that to different people. And, I always kind of go off of with the offense, when they're trying to score points when they go into hurry up and they seem in rhythm and stuff. And from the get-go, that's just not really what this game was. It was kind of, they'd kind of wander up to the line. They'd kind of look around. They'd look over. They, kind of rotate some players in and stuff. There was no point for the offense where you really felt like they were worried about scoring too many points. They knew they could score enough to win. Even if the defense completely shit the bed, the offense knew they would be able to score more than Minnesota would against the Buckeyes. So, it wasn't the best performance, and I think people sleptwalked through it. I think the coaching staff sleptwalked through it. I I wasn't too concerned with it. I mean, the Buckeye offense is capable of outscoring almost anyone that they step onto the field with. And Saturday, just like on the defensive side, the offensive side, like Saturday meant nothing to me. It didn't change my opinion at anything at all.
Okay. Well, I know the couple other notes that I had seen, and part of it kind of ties into what you said here. It wasn't like it was an overly creative game plan, but more than a few times it got frustrating seeing wide receivers run routes short of the first down marker. I mean, that's the first sign of being a smart wide receiver is on a 3rd and 8, you can't run a 7-yard route. No matter if you're Paris Campbell and you think you're the slickest guy on the field, run the 8 yards, get the first down when you make the catch. So that was frustrating to me a little bit. And then the other two kind of tie back into the running game. One is if you watch it, because we kind of talked about it last week, but if you watch, there's still a lot of these plays where the formation sets up with the tight end lining up kind of in, not quite in the backfield, not kind of a little split back, wing T kind of formation, but the tight end will be there. Sometimes he'll go in a little bit of a motion or whatever, but for some reason they seem to not want to use this guy doing, for blocking help. He's not chipping on a defensive end. He's not helping the tackles out. The guy that's stuck picking up the blitz or whatever is typically your running back. And when you have a game like Isaiah Prince did on Saturday, that's one that you need that help. And, I mentioned it in the article I wrote earlier this week. I'm really surprised that on the one sack, if you saw it, like he turns around and looks at the sidelines like, hey, where's my help? Like you could see him yelling. I don't know if that's what he said. That's what it looked like to me on TV. But, when you have those guys there, I'm telling you as an offensive lineman, a chip block is a big help. I'm not saying he has to post up on a 4-star defensive end. Just bump him with your shoulder to give your offensive lineman a little bit of help. The other thing that I noticed, and it kind of ties into what we were talking about on the defense when you had that really sweet segue over here, was we run a lot of play action passes also out of formations that we simply don't run the ball out of. And I understand part of it is, you're still trying to see if you can get the linebacker to bite, even just for a second, get the safety to bite, get your guy that extra step on his route. But at some point, you have to start running the ball out of those formations so those plays work. Because as much as we don't like him, D'Antonio and Harbaugh are going to see that, and their guys aren't going to bite on this. So you have to put some of that on tape at some point. That was just the one things that I had noticed, and as I mentioned, I put it on Twitter, we talked about it. You said it earlier, if you're going to run the ball, the zone read is not a threat because nobody is going to buy Dwayne Haskins keeping the ball. All that does on a zone block, your offensive line leaves somebody unblocked. That's the whole point. It's just like the option. The play is designed to read what that guy does. Does he crash the running back or does he crash the quarterback? Whichever one he's crashing to, the other one takes the ball. It's a basic offense. When you have the zone read and your quarterback is not a threat, they're not going to pay attention to him. They're always coming to the running back. He still hands it off. Now it takes him an extra second to make the read on that defensive lineman, and the guy's crashing down on him. Either Haskins is going to have to keep it sometimes, or just stop doing that and go to a straight handoff because that way your running back has a chance to make a play. Those were the offensive notes I had. Is there anything else you had on the offense?
No, I mean, I don't think we'll see any changes this Saturday.
Unfortunately, you're probably right.
I really think they're going to try to get through to this bye week with what they are doing now. And they'll have 2 weeks to kind of implement more run game type stuff. I feel like they've been so confident in their running ability these past couple years where they've ran these same type of run plays and they're getting 8-9 yards a pop that they weren't ready for the offensive line run game to struggle this much. So I think they're going to get through Purdue. When we come out against Nebraska, I think we're going to see a different style of run game offense. I would not be shocked if Brandon Bowen is starting guard at that point. I feel like he's going to be back. I think he's going to take Malcolm Pridgeon's starting job. I think you're going to have Knox and Bowen on both sides. I think you're going to have a new offensive philosophy going into the later part of the year where you kind of need that run game to really step up quite a bit. Dwayne Haskins isn't going to be able to carry you if it's, 2 feet of snow, like it's just, there's only so much he's going to be able to do. So I think we'll get rid of some of that zone read stuff, but we will see it Saturday. Y'all are going to be frustrated. The run game's probably still going to struggle because Purdue actually has a pretty good run defense. But Dwayne Haskins is going to throw for 5 billion yards and we're going to win. So
all right.
Wait till after the bye week.
So with that, real quick, let's review the over-unders. Kind of our keys to the game last week. So first one was Haskins, 5 touchdown passes. He ended up with 3. We both took over. Overall rushing yards was at 200 yards. It was 92 as a team, 86 from the running backs. You had the over, I had the under. Any receiver having 3 touchdowns, we both took the under. KJ, as I mentioned, had the 2 touchdowns. So we had that one. Defensive line with 3 sacks. We both took the over there. We both missed that. We only had 1 sack from a defensive lineman from Draymond Jones. Defensive backs, we had 1 pick. Actually ended up with 2 for the day. Pryor and Sheffield both get credited with 1. We actually taken the under there, and we both happily missed those. And then the last one was Nuremberger having 3 field goals. He, of course, had 0, but I'm going to claim that one as a win because we just went with the kicker, and our kicker got 3 kicks. So we'll take that one there. Obviously, I mentioned it at the very beginning. We kind of talked on it. The only real news that's came out of the player and staff interviews has been everybody wants to ask about a guy who hasn't been on the team in 4 weeks. No real changes to the depth chart or anything. Any last little tidbits before we wrap up Minnesota here that you want to touch on, man? Or are you ready to take a break?
Let's just move on from that crap game.
Sounds good to me. So we'll go ahead and pause here then. We got a sponsor from West Lafayette this week, a place called Brahms Funhouse. So we'll take a quick minute. We'll come back, and then we'll break down the Purdue game. So we will be right back.
Howdy folks, your man Joey T. Iller here, and I must ask you a question. Have you been banging on your drum to find a place for your undersized youngins to bob and weave a little rondelle more? Have you been trying to engineer a place where even Danny can hope to succeed? Has your boy Daryl been searching for a safe space free of hardcore music, perhaps something a little more like Sister Hazel? Well, we've got just the place for you here at Brahms Funhouse. We have a wide open style that can take you from the hilltops of western Kentucky to the tracks here in West Lafayette. We have little people running left and right, leaving you to guess where to look. And if that doesn't blow you away, I don't know what will. You can feel the breeze blowing like a train whistle. So come on down to Brahms just off Highway 52 where you can play along. We'll have Ross aid you in your pursuit of that old oaken bucket.
All right, Brandon, so let's go ahead and kick off segment number 2 here and look forward to Purdue. Purdue comes in, as I mentioned, they're 3-3, 2-1 overall in the conference. Last week they beat Illinois 46-7, which is, the equivalent of a Big Ten West group of 5 teams. So no real challenge coming out of Lovie Smith's team this year. So, Purdue rolled big. It was. I saw the note. I forget the exact number. Don't quote me on this 100%, but that was their largest win in a game since, I think, 2012 at Purdue. So, they're coming in off a high. Obviously, the game's going to be at home at night. Purdue has one of those night game mystiques about it. I think it's because the stadium's a little bit smaller, so the darkness kind of creeps into the field a little bit more. Then, they're always wearing black jerseys and, kind of plays to their advantage a little bit. It's not quite as dark as Northwestern's field seems to be all the time, but, it's not quite the high fidelity lights that Ohio Stadium seems to have that we like. But, Purdue's offense comes in. They're averaging 330 yards a game. averaging about 180 yards rushing, and they're averaging 330 yards passing and 180 yards rushing for about 510 yards total per game. Defense gives up about 267 yards passing. They're averaging just under 150 yards rushing they give up. They have been in every game that they've lost for the most part this year. At one point, I think it was, they had 3 losses by a combined 8 points. I think it was early in the season, something like that. Purdue's an up-and-coming team. They're not a bad team by any means. They just haven't quite learned how to win. Obviously, on offense, they have Rondell Moore, who has been just a spark plug for them, the true freshman. He's I forget the exact number. What's he stand, like 5'9" or 5'10", something like that? He's a shorter guy, right?
He's 5'9", 175.
Yeah, so, he burst onto the scene in that Northwestern game and has been a huge part of their offense. He has over 130 yards rushing and over 550 yards receiving for the year. He's combined to score 6 touchdowns. But looking at this, I'll let you decide if you want to talk about Purdue's offense or Purdue's defense first, and let me know what your thoughts are and how does Ohio State match up.
Well, I know, the common theme is, we're supposed to pretend like Purdue's this good team and Ohio State's going to lose this game. Ohio State's always struggled against Purdue. It's a night game at West Lafayette. I don't really care that Ohio State struggled against Purdue in the 2000s. I mean, they haven't played Purdue since 2013. Mm-hmm. I don't give a shit how much they struggled against Purdue back when Jim Tressel was the coach. This is a different time. So I know as a Buckeye fan base, it's the cool thing to be negative all the time, but Purdue doesn't worry me too much. We can jump to their offense. I think their offense, they've got 3 pretty good players. You've got David Blau.
Sure, we'll go with whichever one.
Who I was shocked to lost his starting job last year. I mean, if you think all the way back to when Hayes and Cannon first started in the Ozone, I'm motivated. I'm writing top 5 at each position going to Big Ten. I had David Blau as I think number 2 going into the year last year. He came out early and threw for 300 yards. And next thing you know, Sindelar is starting as the quarterback, and going into this year, Sindelar is the starter. David Blau took it over. He's throwing a lot, but he's not exactly facing any good defenses. I mean, if you look at the,
you mean
defenses,
Eastern Michigan's not a great defense?
No, I mean, they're facing some really bad stuff, but we see the stats and we're supposed to pretend Purdue's going to put up 4,000 yards against Ohio State. They're going to score at least 70 bajillion points. But you look, I mean, Northwestern, total defense, 85th. Eastern Michigan, total defense, 83. Missouri, total defense, 96. Boston College, total defense, 67. Nebraska, total defense, 109. Illinois, total defense, 125. I mean, there's only 130 teams. Yeah. So, the highest ranked defense they faced was Boston College, which was 67th. These past 2 weeks, when David Blau's been putting up 400 yards and everyone's freaking out because Purdue looks so amazing, Nebraska and Illinois, 109 and 125. And so, as shitty as we think Ohio State's defense is,
it could be
even Ohio State's total defense is 58. Yeah. That's way better than anything that they face. And Ohio State's one of those streaky defenses where they give up big play here and there. But for the most part, they kind of shut down offenses for a majority of the game. It's just about 3 or 4 times they give up huge plays. So even Ohio State's at 58. I mean, so you think about how crappy Ohio State's defense has been, and that they are over 50 spots better than some of these teams that Purdue is putting up all these yards against. So, I mean, Purdue's offense is good. Jeff Brom's doing good things there. I think David Blau is a very good quarterback. I actually am a real huge fan of DJ Knox. I've been a fan of him for a few years. He's a 5th-year senior now. I think DJ Knox does good things. He's got 540 yards rushing on the year. He's got 9 catches. 5 touchdowns. So like he is a threat out of the backfield. Rondale Moore, I would just like triple team his ass and like shut him down. Because if you shut down him, you will shut down the big plays for the Boilermakers. The other thing that does concern me a little bit with Purdue is they do like to use their tight ends. We know Ohio State typically has problems with teams that know that tight ends are part of the offense and you can throw it to them. So the Purdue tight ends have combined for 27 catches, 461 yards, and 2 touchdowns. Both of them are upperclassmen, like the 2 main guys that they use. So that worries me a little bit. Besides tight ends, the other concern for me with Purdue is they do have a pretty big offensive line. And you looked at last week against Minnesota where the defensive line struggled to get any penetration against guys that were actually pretty big. Every one of Purdue's offensive linemen are over 300 pounds, except for their left tackle who's 6'7", 290. They've got some pretty big guys out there. And they've only given up 12 sacks on the year. So, I mean, the offensive line is going to cause some problems. And that's where I go back to, I hope Ohio State just puts some beef on that line, plugs as many gaps as possible, takes away DJ Knox from the game completely, and focuses their pass coverage on Rondale Moore.
Well, and, you know, the question has to be asked, and I want your opinion on this. So, obviously, we remember as Ohio State fans, the Purdues of, you know, the 90s and the 2000s, right? Like, we remember Drew Brees when he was the Purdue quarterback. We remember Joe Tiller's, you know, spread offense when he first brought that to the Big Ten. And, you know, like, it just set the conference on fire. You know, it really started not Ohio State, but the entire Big Ten from going from that, you know, the old school, you know, lining up with a fullback and a running back and 2 wide receivers to, you know, actually having multi-wide receiver sets on the field and whatnot. And that was the first that we'd saw that in the Big Ten. And, you know, Purdue made some noise then. And even when they had obviously a lesser degree of talent, Purdue was still able to make noise in the conference. So my question for you is, when you see the numbers like what Blau has put up this year, and you see like Rondale Moore, when you see him on the highlight reel and you see some of his stats, do you think that part of it is that old school, what we remember Purdue has been over the last 20 years or so, that creeps in as to why everybody's so scared of them? Or is it honestly just because Ohio State has almost, I don't know what the exact right word is, but Ohio State has almost had this, hey, we've played badly in some games and certain aspects of the game, and a certain faction of the fan base thinks it's time for Ohio State to lose. And even though this isn't truly a trap game, like by the normal sense, that people are trying to play it out as one, and that's why people are worried about Purdue.
I think there's a large portion of the Ohio State fan base that purely focuses on stats. And I think that's what's kind of worrying them about Purdue. I mean, you look at David Blau. I mean, he's putting up 300-yard games, and Rondale Moore's running all over people. And I think there is almost a superiority complex that Ohio State fan base has about where Ohio State is expected to do everything perfect, and no team should ever be able to get a first down on the Buckeyes. The Buckeyes should be able to score a touchdown on every time that they have the ball. There's really no situational awareness to a few people where, like, you can tell when Ohio State's setting up something bigger, or you can tell when Ohio State's trying to get some backups, some playing time. But there's a large portion where it could be all third stringers in there on the defense, and they give up a touchdown, and the defense suddenly sucks. You know, it's a horrible defense where, as you can look at them, like, well, I mean, like, there were like 4 walk-ons playing there, you know, like that's not the defense. So I think a lot of it has to do with the gaudy stats that Purdue is putting up, without regards to the horrible defenses that Purdue is playing. You factor that into kind of how the defense has struggled over and over and over this year, that it's kind of came to a head where I think some people are just very frustrated. In their minds, Ohio State's defense is somewhere around the level of like a Connecticut or an Oregon State, where you're giving up 70 points. Like they've convinced themselves that the Ohio State defense is that bad. And I think you combine that with the PTSD from last year, where Ohio State went into Iowa and they lost by a lot of points and looked pretty dumb. So I think you factor all that all that together, you see a road game after struggling for a few weeks to kind of keep focus at night, and people are just freaking out and think that the Purdue's going to go in there and blow them away, which I don't agree with.
So, Ohio State, when we played TCU earlier this year, granted TCU's kind of fallen off, but that was kind of a bit of a statement game. Ohio State showed that, they could control the game when they needed to. And everybody remembers the 4 minutes of game time when Ohio State won that game. Later on, obviously, they went to Penn State. They battled through in a hostile environment against a very good team, even though they lost to Michigan State last weekend, a very good team. And, they managed to squeak out of there with a win. Is part of the hang-up perhaps that even though we've had those good wins over really good teams that are tight, Ohio State really hasn't had the dominant win, it feels like to me, over a Power 5 team that we're used to having at least at one time, where somebody that should be able to put up a fight, Ohio State just simply decides, you are not going to do that. We're going to stomp that ass this week. You always have that one where it's, a mid-level Big Ten team or somebody, then they come out and just crush them by, 50 points. And it's like, whoa, that was kind of eye-opening. You think about it, and the game I have in mind is actually not an Ohio State game right now, but, like last weekend, Alabama comes out and puts a beat down on Arkansas, even though they let Arkansas score a lot of points late. But, they kind of had that beat down of a mid-level conference opponent. And this year with the Buckeyes, you really haven't seen that, it doesn't feel like. And is that a hang-up? Is that part of what's contributing to Ohio State there? And do they need that game?
I think that comes down to, I feel like our definition of a blowout for Ohio State fans has gotten almost unrealistic. I mean, like, you look at some of their wins, and, like, I don't personally consider Arkansas any better than Rutgers or Oregon State. I feel like they are the same thing. So you look at that, and Ohio State had their way with those two teams. They might be a little bit better, but I mean, you look at, even with Minnesota, like, think about, since we're so focused during Purdue week on the 2000s, like, think about a 16-point win during the Tressel years. Like, we would have considered that a blowout because that's just how it was. We've kind of turned into an entitled fan base where, like, if it's not a 30-point win, it's a failure. And, so I think that's kind of where we're at with that, where, like, maybe our definition of good wins and blowouts has kind of exceeded what expectations should really be. And I mean, Indiana's kind of in that realm where it's kind of like that. They struggled at times, but I mean, they still had a 23-point win there. I consider that pretty good. Even TCU, even though they fell off, it's a different team now than it was then. But I mean, that's a 12-point win. I think there's good wins there. I just don't think. I think we're so entitled as a fan base. There will never be a good enough win. There will always be something wrong with their wins. Something wrong with what the defense could have done better.
Okay. All right. Well, we kind of have skimmed over this a little bit, but what about when Purdue's on defense? Is there anything that you want to talk about with them?
Well, I think with their defense, they kind of do what I hope Ohio State does, where their defensive line is kind of there to fill blockers, and their linebackers are their playmakers. I mean, like, you even just look at the stats. I mean, they're two deep of their defensive line have combined for 3 sacks and 7 tackles for loss. I mean, like, that's the stats of, like, a backup defensive end for the Buckeyes. That is 7 dudes with, their one defensive tackle spot having 3 spots that have combined for 3 sacks and 7 tackles for loss. I mean, their job is just to be bodies to kind of blow up. But then you look back at their linebackers, Marcus Bailey from Columbus, he's going to play good on Saturday. He's a stud. Cornell Jones, Derek Barnes, those 3 with their backups have combined for 10 sacks and 20.5 tackles for losses. Their linebackers are where their plays are made from. I think Ohio State's going to struggle to run the ball on Saturday night. With that said, their passing defense is pretty bad. I mean, I fully expect Dwayne Haskins to break the record for Ohio State on Saturday night. I think he's going to throw for 450 plus yards on Saturday night. I don't think Purdue's defense is going to be able to stop Ohio State's pass game. But I think any success that defense has is going to come from the linebackers who have shown time and time again that they are the playmakers for that defense. And it'll be interesting to see how it goes. But I think Ohio State passing game is going to have another huge game.
Okay. Well, with that in mind, you making some predictions here. Let's take a look at our keys of the game and get some over-unders here. Didn't really change a whole lot up because I think a lot of these are kind of settling into these can be very poignant KPIs for Ohio State as far as their success on Saturday. So first one's first. Haskins, 5 touchdown passes, over, under?
Over.
Over? I agree with you 100% because, as you mentioned, it's going to be on the passing game to make noise this week. Overall rushing attack, 200 yards, over, under?
I'm going to go under. I'm telling you, though, after this bye week, I'm going to start going over. I think there's going to be some major changes.
I think so far we're running chalk because I think we're both going to nail those ones. What about the receivers? I changed it up a little bit. I'm going to try to get you to get a little bit of a different pick here this week. Any receiver, 2 touchdowns or more, over, under? Does he spread it out to everyone, or does he get one that gets 2 or 3 touchdowns?
I'm going to go over. I mean, that KJ Hill and Paris Campbell combination, one of them blows up every week, and I think we're going to see it again, and we'll go over on that one.
Okay. So far we're 3 for 3 getting this one together. So, what about the defensive line? Do we have 3 sacks between the? You know what? I'm gonna change this one on the fly. I'm audibling, which is something that Ohio State hasn't been doing.
Omaha.
Yeah, right. Do the front 7, your defensive line and linebackers, do they combine for 3 sacks, over, under?
Man, it would have been easy if you said defensive line. Throwing the linebackers in there. I will go over. David Blough's not the most mobile quarterback. I think most of it will be linebackers, though. I will say that.
Well, half of them last week were.
Yeah.
Half of the 2.
I would not be shocked if all 3 were.
I'm actually going to go under. And it's not that I don't think they're capable of it. I think this is going to be another week where some of the guys that aren't quite up to 100% aren't going to get as much playing time, and that's going to create the ability to really concentrate on guys like Chase Young and kind of start shutting him down. So I'm going to go under there. Last one here, defensive backs. Do we have a pick, yes or no?
Last week they finally got us. We kept on saying no.
Right?
I'm going to go with at least one. I know Blough's not thrown too many picks this year. I think he has 2 on the year, but you look back at years past and he has been prone to some interceptions. I really hope Ohio State gets at least 1.
Well, I'm one to take the things that work well and not change those. And since we went under last week and we got 2, I'm going under here with the hopes that I'm wrong. So, I'm going to go ahead and put that one there. I've got you down as equals 2, so that way we got that marked also. Any last thing you want to talk about on Purdue here, or you want to come back and drop your Son of a Schmidt? I know you mentioned before we came on the air that you got a couple ideas rolling around in your head, so I know we got some good stuff coming from you this week.
Yeah, like,
anything on Purdue?
Some weeks I got nothing. Today I've got about 3 different topics I could go after, so nothing else with Purdue. I mean, y'all can worry all you want. It's night game, West Lafayette, whatever. I think Ohio State's going to win. Just remember, no matter how many big plays Ohio State gives up, the other team has to score more points than Dwayne Haskins and the Buckeye offense. So, like, you would have to expect the Buckeye defense to give up at least 4 big plays to even be in any game, because Ohio State's offense is not going through any game without scoring at least 30 points when they're actually trying.
All right, good point, man. All right, so we'll pause real quick. We'll come back and get Son of a Schmidt. So hold on just a second. Get yourself prepared.
Ladies and gentlemen, it is now time for your favorite weekly segment.
Son of a Schmidt.
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 All right, dude. So for Son of a Schmidt here, I'm actually going to jump in on you a little bit because you have a couple things that you want to go off on here. Mine is one I've mentioned on, so I'm going to go ahead and get that out of the way and give you the floor for the entire segment, okay? The Son of a Schmidt I had for this week is simply, for a lack of a better word, titled Not Making Adjustments Earlier So You Can Succeed. You know, we've talked about it multiple times. I still cannot accept the fact that Ohio State is a second-half team and they are incapable of making adjustments on the fly in the first half. It's great that we know we can make adjustments coming out after halftime and things get better, and you have like the game against Indiana where you hold them to 80 yards in the entire second half. That's fantastic. But there is no reason that Ohio State can't get some of those adjustments made in the first half, you know, after the first quarter, when the offense is on the field, whatever. There has to be adjustments that can be made. And quite frankly, if you don't learn to make those adjustments against a Purdue, against Indiana, against Northwestern, or whoever else that's in here, you know, Nebraska coming up in a couple weeks, that will eventually bite you, because if you don't do that at some point, the defense is going to give up those 4 big plays that you mentioned in the last segment, and you're going to face a team like potentially a Michigan. You're going to face a team in a playoff game or something that's going to be there because they're good, and they're going to jump out, and then you're really going to be in trouble because you're playing from behind, and you've limited an offense that can't run the ball to passing, and the defense is going to tee off on you. So I don't know why we refuse to make these adjustments in the first half, but just some adjustments would be nice. I mean, even if it's not the game-changing adjustments like they make now at halftime, there has to be something that's done on the fly, and it feels like it's not being done enough, and it is going to bite Ohio State at some point, and I just hope that it's not against a team that can outscore us. So, Son of a Schmidt, make your adjustments when we're on the field, and now I'm going to turn it over to you because I know you're ready to go, man. So go right ahead.
That's a good one. I mean, like, I think that's a big frustration for the entire Ohio State fan base is, like, you see things that need to be changed, and, like, they're just so dead set on what they went into that game with that they can't adjust. I mean, I know we didn't talk about it, and it kind of slipped my mind, but, like, I feel like what really messed Ohio State up early on against Minnesota was the Wildcat that they came out with. I forget what that dude's name even was, but
it was like the quarterback who went to tight end,
like
wide receiver.
Yeah, like he came out and he was able to move the ball, and they're kind of running a different type of offense that I know nobody was expecting, but like, you would think a staff with Larry Johnson, Greg Schiano, Alex Grinch, Billy Davis, you know, like, would be able to be like, all right, they've got this dude that's coming in and running quarterback. Let's make a change and run a different type of defense. So I'm completely on board with that one. My Son of a Schmidt. I think we're going to talk a little bit more about Minnesota real quick. So my Son of a Schmidt comes from, I guess I'm confused about where the fan base is coming from this week. So, as you guys know from last week's Son of a Schmidt, we're in Branson. Saturday during the Minnesota game, I'm driving back from from middle of Kansas. We stayed in Salina, Kansas, which was a beautiful shithole. And then we drove the rest of the way back to Colorado the next day. So I'm watching the game on my phone in the passenger seat of my wife's car while she's driving. And so I had notifications shut off. I didn't check Twitter. I didn't do any of that stuff just because, like, West Kansas, you're in a, I don't even want to say streaming place because it's a lot of buffering. It would be a lot of like missing plays, and that speeds up and goes to the plays. So I didn't want to be bogged down with any other crap. So like I watched the game. Obviously, I was frustrated about some stuff. I come back on after the game, and like it's like a damn funeral is going on for the Buckeyes. And I felt like an asshole. I didn't send flowers. I didn't, like show my respects.
No casseroles.
Yeah, there was no casserole for the families. I was not expecting that. So my thing comes back to this is like, what did Minnesota do? Why the Minnesota game is where the Buckeyes drew a line as a fan base and said, okay, now we suck. Like there was so much that happened prior to that Minnesota game that should have raised your worriness about the Buckeye defense. I mean, you look at Oregon State. They gave up 200 yards passing to a backup quarterback in the first half. This same Oregon State quarterback has not had that high of a passer rating all season so far as he did against the Buckeyes. They gave up almost 200 yards rushing to Artavius Pierce, who has not broken 100 yards since that game. I mean, like, that should have been a concern. You go into TCU, they gave up over 500 yards of offense to TCU. Sean Robinson threw for 308 yards. That same Sean Robinson didn't throw for 200 yards against Southern Methodist, Texas, or Iowa State. They gave up 154 yards rushing to Darius Anderson on 13 yards per attempt. Darius Anderson, combined in his other 5 games since that, or without playing the Buckeyes, has combined for 201 yards rushing on 3.8 yards per carry. That should have worried you. Against Penn State, 286 yards passing to Trace McSorley. He failed to break 165 yards passing against Illinois or Pittsburgh and was held way under that against Appalachian State and Kent State. Oh, by the way, they let Trace McSorley run for 175 yards. He hasn't even came close to rushing for 100 yards against any of those other teams, let alone 200 yards. That should have been a concern. Against the Buckeyes, they let Peyton Ramsey throw for 322 passing yards. FIU, Virginia, Ball State held him to under 175 yards. Rutgers held him to under 288 yards. And they have like 47 walk-on kickers playing defense for them, all right? So, like, that should have worried you. So, like, I don't know. My thing is, like, why is Minnesota where everyone drew the line that Ohio State's no longer a good team, that they no longer deserve to be in the playoffs, that they no longer deserve to be in the top 5 based off of the fan base, that they now are going to lose to a Purdue? Like, why was it Minnesota that drove everyone to the breaking point? Like, that's what I don't get. Like, they've got glaring weaknesses. I'm not sitting here trying to pretend like they don't, but like, why as a fan base did we choose the game where they're missing 5 starters, the game where it's a noon game against a crappy team in Minnesota, a team that they haven't played in years? Like, why was it that game? That is just my question. Like, Ohio State had glaring weaknesses going into that game. Why was it Minnesota that caused Ohio State, Buckeye Nation to freak out as a whole and determine that we no longer are going to beat Michigan? We may even lose a few games on our way to Michigan. It's just like Minnesota fucking broke us. So, son of a Schmidt, why was it?
That may very well have been your best son of a Schmidt I've ever heard.
And you'll probably see that in an article later on.
Is that a spoiler alert I'm getting?
Spoiler alert.
That's a good question, man. I mean, we were talking about it after the game, and, I was extremely frustrated myself. especially having seen, like Michigan play, and then, Saturday night, especially you see what they did to Wisconsin, and it's frustrating. And I made the comment that I don't know that defense can beat Michigan right now, and I'm still not convinced as it is that they can. The defense, just the defense, not the team, just the defense. But no, you're right. I thought I was bad. And then when you and I talked, I went and started looking around because I wanted to see if I was just being crazy or what. And oh my God, you would have thought that I just saw somebody that cut their finger, and there's other people out here that have witnessed a mass homicide. So yeah, I was dumbfounded. You're exactly right, dude.
Well, and one thing, and I think you even said it, and I agree with it. Like, if Ohio State plays like they did on Saturday against Minnesota, they will lose against Michigan. I have no doubt about that. But at the same time, like, I don't expect Ohio State to play Michigan like they did against a noon game against Minnesota. Like, it's just a letdown game. And also, I want to go back and look at stats. Every year I want to do it because every year I'm worried about it. But every year, this stupid pink out game, Ohio State struggles. Every year. It's been like the last 4 or 5 years. And one of these days, I'm going to have the motivation enough to go back and look at all the stats and stuff. But it seems like every year of these pink out games, Ohio State struggles against a really crappy team. And of course, they're all like noon games against lower caliber teams. The team just doesn't play up. So, man, son of a Schmidt. I'm going to go with one more thing real quick. I'm taking this over.
I told you the segment's yours, dude. You own it.
As a fan, reporters out there, I'm tired of you wasting your time on nonsense. Like, I don't care what Damon Arnett or Dwayne Haskins or anyone thinks about Nick Bosa leaving. Like, that stuff's like, that ship's already sailed. I care about what Ohio State thinks about Purdue's offense, on how they're going to fix it, how the run game's going to improve. I care about the Purdue game. I don't care what they think about Nick Bosa leaving. He's gone. They support him. We all know that. Move on. Son of a Schmidt.
Okay, I was going to take a break and come back for Schmidt picks, but I don't want to stop you if you've got another one you're going to roll here. So
let me talk about Schmidt picks. No, I'm good.
All right, brother. Well, on that note, let's pause real quick for station identification. When we come back, we'll cover our Schmidt picks, and we'll get a prediction for the Ohio State game this weekend, and we will be right back. So give me about 30 seconds.
You are listening to the Sons of Schmidt podcast on the Ozone Radio Network, presented by Hayes and Cannon. The ORN is the online radio home of the Buckeye Sloopcast, the Silver Bullets podcast, Across the Field, and of course, the Sons of Schmidt, with new episodes broadcast every day of the week. For more information, go to www.theozone.net. And now, back to the show.
All right, duders. So, last week we had quite a few actually pretty decent games. I know, you were driving, so you didn't get to see everything, but there was some good football on, and of course, Major League Baseball playoffs are going on at the same time. And, this is, in my mind, the best time of the year. I mean, I absolutely love it. As a sports fan, you can spend all weekend just completely immersed in 5 or 6 different screens going. A lot of good games were played. Obviously, Ohio State won. But, there were a couple other ones that were definitely worth watching as both football fans and as Ohio State fans, things that came into play. So, as a reminder, we had the LSU Georgia game. We had Oregon versus Washington, Michigan versus Wisconsin, Texas versus Baylor, and, of course, Ohio State and Minnesota. I got to give you props. This is twice this year that you have went perfect on the picks. So you had LSU, which is real funny because if you remember, you really flip-flopped there. And if I remember correctly, you really wanted to take Georgia. So I'm putting an asterisk next to your name here.
But I picked them.
That's true. But so, yeah, that knocks you to 27-9. That actually bumps you up there.
That's
so
pretty good, huh?
That's a pretty damn good record so far. I had all the exact same picks, only I took Georgia in that game, so obviously
Loser.
I dropped a game to you. Knocked me down. I really got to roll one here and have you have a bad week because I'm down 3 games on you, 24-12 for the season.
Hey, Mike, winners don't have bad weeks.
Oh, look at damnedest thing. We just lost Brandon from the broadcast, so looks like he's not getting any picks in this week. But this week there's actually a really good slate of games. Obviously, besides the fact that the playoffs, as I mentioned, are going on and baseball and the NFL will be there on Sunday. There's a lot of key matchups on Saturday that'll be worth keeping an eye on. This week, our Schmidt picks, we're going to look at, first of all, a big game in the Big Ten. Number 6, the team up north, goes to number 24, the team up North State. So what do you got here between Michigan and Michigan State?
I hate to say it, but I think Michigan's playing some really good ball right now, and
Michigan is playing very good ball.
I think there's almost zero chance that Michigan State's offense can put up a lot of points against Michigan. I'm assuming at some point they're going to get LJ Scott back, and that will help out quite a bit. But I got to go with Michigan on this one.
Early in the season, we both had Michigan State predicted to be better than they have been. They've been a bit of a disappointment, obviously, but, they're ranked because they beat Penn State. And I know how good Penn State is. We watched them. We've watched them all season. But they made it in the top 25 because they beat Penn State last week. So props to them for that. But Sparty is not going to win this game. It's just they're not as good as Michigan is playing right now. So the next game we have is number 16 NC State goes to number 3 Clemson. Big matchup in the ACC here, and obviously has big playoff implications also. What do you have in this game, dude?
I think NC State is a fraud, and I don't think they were a good team coming into this year, and them beating James Madison, Georgia State, Marshall, Virginia, and Boston College doesn't change things for me. I still congrats, you guys are undefeated. I would have loved to see you guys play West Virginia, but that game was canceled. So I think Clemson wins, and I don't think it's going to be close.
Well, on paper, obviously Clemson is the better of these two teams. But because Ben and Joe live in North Carolina, I've got to pick against them, so I'm going with Clemson also.
Oh, thanks for the free win.
You said Clemson.
I thought you said you were going with NC State.
I said because they live there, I'm going with Clemson.
I was going to say, go with NC State, man.
No. The next one here actually was a lot of fun because I made a statement on Saturday about this game and have had a whole lot of fun with Mississippi State fans who went and searched for MSU on Twitter and have engaged in conversation with me that has been actually a good amount of humor to me. Number 22, Mississippi State goes to number 5, LSU. The statement that I made on Saturday was Mississippi State is nothing to LSU. LSU should manhandle this game because it was in reference to somebody that said if LSU beats Mississippi State and then beats Alabama in their next couple games, that they should be the number 1 team in the nation. I don't buy that they should be number 1 if that happens, but they clearly move into the top 4. They may even move into the top 2 or 3, but I don't see them as number 1 because I just don't see Mississippi State as being a big push there. That being said, Mississippi State is ranked 22nd in the nation. They do go to Death Valley. I just don't see Mississippi State winning this game. I'm going with LSU. What do you have in this game?
I know I talked about this a few weeks ago, but how the hell did Mississippi State get back in top 25?
That's what I'm trying to figure out, man.
I blinked and they were up to number 12 or something, and then they lose to Kentucky and Florida. They drop out, and then all of a sudden they're back in top 22. What the? Mississippi State frustrates me because they year after year live off of that SEC.
Yep.
Crap, and they don't ever do shit to merit being in the top 25. So Mississippi State, they are like that STD that just sticks around. No matter how many times it gets fixed, it fucking comes back. So Yeah, LSU's winning this game.
All right. Next game, we got number 12, Oregon goes to number 25, Washington State, which, I don't watch ESPN, but everybody knows about the College Game Day, the Washington State flag. They're finally going to Pullman for the first time. So it'll be a big party on campus. I know, our friends Shrek and his family, hell, they might even make the trek over there for this one because it's going to be a good time. But what do you have in this game here? I know you follow the Pac-12 a lot more than most people do, but what do you got in this game?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think Washington State's another team that is top 25 worthy. They're kind of in there because, just the way their schedule is kind of worked out. I mean, they've got 5 wins, but 4 of those wins are against Wyoming, San Jose State, Eastern Washington, and Oregon State. I mean, there are not many teams out there that wouldn't have at least 4 wins over those teams. 5th win against Utah, I consider that a pretty good big win. Loss against USC. But I don't think ultimately they're a top 25 team. Oregon's another team that I feel like is severely overrated each year. And this year they are there again, but I think Oregon wins this one, even going into Washington State there.
Yeah, I don't think Oregon's truly worthy of a top 12 ranking, but having watched some of that Oregon game on Saturday, they're not that bad. Now, they're not in the elite group of the top 4, 5, 6 teams in college football. Not saying that, but Oregon's pretty good. And that quarterback they have is that kid's going to turn that program around. Their quarterback and their coach, they're going to make some noise. Now, will they ever truly be, the top 2 or 3 teams in the country? I don't think so. Not the way they play and the way they recruit and the way their schedule works out, and they play late in the day usually. But Oregon is going to make some noise again. They're going to start, playing for the Pac-12 title every year. So they're definitely trending in the right direction. But on that, I'm definitely taking Oregon in this game too. So last one before we get to the Buckeyes is Stanford, who is now unranked. They've fallen out. Goes to Tempe to take on your Sun Devils. What do you got here, man?
See, this is a trap game from you. This is a game that you threw in there, knowing
specifically to try to get one back.
To try to get one back. It's going to be hard for me to go against the Sun Devils. Sun Devils are so hit and miss, man. It's so frustrating to be a fan of them. Manny Wilkins at quarterback, you don't know what you're going to get with him. I don't know, I'm going to go for it, man. You can make this game up. I'm going to go with Arizona State on this one. It's a home game. So, first of all, it's a Thursday night game. Arizona State's much more of a Thursday night team than Stanford is. Arizona State's coming off of a bye week. Stanford's coming off of a short week where they got their butts kicked by Utah. I think Tempe's going to be rolling on Thursday night. They don't give a shit about school.
No.
Thursday night, you're going to have a stadium full of crazy people. I think Arizona State is going to pull this one out. Confidence.
Damn it. See, I thought I was going to slip one by you and you were going to actually go against the Sun Devils and go with Stanford, but there's just something, and you said it, there's something about Arizona State on weird games that they always come out. And they show up, like you said, on a random Thursday or a Friday night game at home and under the lights once it's cooled off from 110 to 109 degrees there in Sun Devil Stadium. So as much as I thought I might get one by you here, I think we're staying chalk so far. So I'm not going to gain any ground on you this week because I'm pretty sure you're not going to take the Boilermakers in this last matchup. But
what, 97% of the Ohio State fan base is?
Hey, well, you and Ben can make your picks together. Hi, Ben. So, last recap here. Obviously, number 2 Ohio State goes to West Lafayette, takes on Purdue Saturday night, primetime, 6:30 kick Eastern. It'll be nice because it'll be a little bit later in the evening here for me. We've talked about the keys to the game. We've talked about how Ohio State matches up. As I said, I know you're going to go with Ohio State here because we just don't see Purdue pulling this one off. But let me get your official prediction and your score here, bud.
Well, like I said, I think Dwayne Haskins is going to have a field day. against the Purdue pass defense. I think we'll see some growing pains still from the defense. I think the defense is still trying to figure things out. Just like the run game, I think we'll see a real big change after this game to the defensive strategy. I think we're going to see kind of status quo. It's too hard to implement a whole new defense in 1 week while preparing for an offense like Purdue. So I think we're going to give up some points, but I think Ohio State wins 52-27.
Oh, man, you just about had me starting to pucker a little bit, because as you were typing that, or, saying that, I was typing my score prediction in so I could give it to you. My score prediction is 52-20. So
you forgot about the fluke touchdown that Ohio State always gives up. That's the extra 7 points.
I'm assuming it's going to be a 93-yard touchdown for Rondell Moore, and it's going to help me in our fantasy league also. So, I'm going 52-20, and same reason I said last week, because Ohio State's giving up about 20 points a game. So prove me wrong, and I'll stop saying that they're going to give up 20 points a game. So I do think Ohio State will be able to move at will, and I think the 52 might actually be a foot off the throttle at some point kind of a thing, where, late in the game they'll try to get some more running yards or something at some point, and if they wanted to keep scoring, they could potentially score more. So that's what I've got, man. Last chance here for you. Anything you want to put in closing before we get out of town?
No. Go Buckeyes, beat Purdue.
All right. Sounds like a plan. So, really, dude, I ain't got nothing else. So let's go ahead and wrap it up. So go Bucks. OH.
I-O.
Buckeye Nation, make sure you're getting the latest news and episodes from the Sons of Schmidt podcast. You can like us on Facebook at facebook.com/Sons of Schmidt. You can follow us on Twitter at Sons of Schmidt, or email the show, sonsofschmidt@gmail.com. And look for us on Hayes and Cannon at theozone.net.